Well, according to social media mavens and journalists, all Gen Zers are entitled, all Millennials are whiny, all Gen Xers are curmudgeonly, and all Boomers are hopefully out of touch. If you talk to the HR pundits and you see what that community has to say, they've got all the secrets in the world on how to cater to your multi-generational workforce and know exactly what each generation needs to be happy and successful. The reality of the situation, however, is that nobody really gets it right. We got some different perspectives on it. We're going to unpack it in a minute. Come on back. Hey folks, Mark here with The Rational Workforce. Thanks so much for tuning in. So today I want to talk about the multi-generational workforce and kind of how it's treated. Now, this is a topic that, I'm in my early 50s. I've been in the workforce pretty much continuously since I was 17 years old, even when I was working part-time in school. And this whole concept of like the multi-generational workforce is just, it's the gift that keeps giving for HR professionals and the magazines and stuff that cover them. And there's always this discussion around how is this generation going to relate to that generation? And I'm Gen X and I face the same BS when I was young about working with baby boomers and greatest generation before them. So it's something that keeps coming up, but there's a little bit of a trend that's going on where it seems to be a little bit more aggressive and a little bit louder. And I think social media has a lot to do with that, but it's kind of digging the trenches between the generations a little deeper than it needs to be. And I think there's this underlying kind of lack of recognition that people are individuals in their own right that's getting completely glossed over. So let's talk about it a little bit. And here's what triggered the thought for covering this in today's episode was I was on Twitter and someone brought this article to my attention. Gen Z workers say they should be hired for their personality, not productivity, because we set the vibes. And of course, there's your obligatory stock photo of generic young people all raising their hands and being vibey. The article talks about, forget the resume. Gen Z thinks you should hire them for their personalities. According to the youngest generation in the workforce, their humor and wit provides a certain vibrance that older employees apparently lack. Not a lot of stats behind it, mostly anecdotal evidence in the form of TikTok videos about people, Gen Zers, talking about how they do bring the vibe and new lingo and slang to the workforce and all that sort of stuff. So just judging by the headline alone, I thought this was going to be a weightier piece than it really was. And, there's this kind of old jerk on Twitter, the screen name Boston Writer. Full disclosure, that's me. That's my main Twitter account. And I said, this can't be real, can it? A chief vibe officer title coming in 3, 2. And look, I'm sarcastic on Twitter. It's my smart-assy creative outlet. Follow me at Boston Writer if you don't already. And, I kind of posted this up, but I really got to thinking a lot about what this means and was it even serious? And, this snide comment about chief vibe officer, I meant it to be a throwaway kind of smart-assy line. But I did a quick search on it, and here's an article that I found about Canva, and Canva actually does have a head of vibe. This is the gentleman here. And this article talks about how there's someone on point for building out workspaces and kind of creating these collaborative experiences for employees and things like that. Maybe that's not such a ridiculous idea, especially when you take a look at this article. Canva is hit an insane $2.7 billion in annual revenue off the AI boom. That's Australian dollars. It's 1.7 billion US. So, maybe there's something to it. Their CEO is a millennial, so that kind of breaks the whole stereotype of millennials feeling, disenfranchised or needing to be coddled. You've got this incredible woman that built a groundbreaking business that bucks that example. And then if you go a little deeper, and again, for those of you who've worked in the HR technology community or have had to endure endless numbers of training calls and seminars about how to work with other generations in the workforce, you've probably seen shit like this, right? 4 common characteristics of Gen X professionals, right? So here's my generation. We're independent, We value a healthy work-life balance. We're flexible and informal. We're technologically adept, right? And, here's what Deloitte has to say about here's what Gen Zs actually want at work. And it goes on to describe, empathy, divergent views on mental health, disparate views on importance to work or personal identity, yada, yada, yada. Look, these types of articles, these types of insights have been floating around for a while. And my biggest point of contention with it is that it's the same complaint that I have with a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion crap that's going around today, is that it takes a group of people and it ascribes certain traits onto those people and then creates all of these systems and rules and things that you're supposed to adhere to based on that definition. And it's dehumanizing. It takes the individual out of the equation, right? So like, when I think about just folks that I work with in my day job, I'm a consultant, I'm a mentor, I sit on advisory boards. I do a lot of work where I get to work. I have the honor of working with a lot of different people in the workplace. And there are so many people that buck the trends, that kind of push back against the ideologies that these media outlets are pushing. For example, I have some really good friends that are Gen Zers. They started this incredible company from their dorm room, and now it's booming. And I'm here in the Raleigh area, and they're just blowing up all over the triangle. They're just growing gangbusters with a wait list of people who want to work for them. This doesn't really sound like a generation that doesn't want to work, or a generation that doesn't come up with new ways of doing things. Like, this is an absolutely impressive and incredible individual. Are there people that fit in those buckets and meet some of those descriptions? Yes, but you find that everywhere. So I really want each of you to kind of resist and ask questions and push back on some of these things that you're being handed, whether it's all people in this generation think this way, or all people of this ethnic group need A, B, and C, or all people with this ideology had this type of upbringing. Like, it's all just nonsense. It's conjecture and it's lazy. And it's this layer that prevents or gives managers the excuses to not get to know you as a person, or to not get to know your expectations. So some of the most common things that I hear about is that, this whole bringing the energy, right? And there's the notion of some of the things we went through here, that the younger generations need to bring and infuse this great energy into the workplace. Not everybody wants to show up and be this radiant beam of energy. Like, some people want to work and get their check and go home, and that should be okay. That doesn't mean that that person isn't passionate about their career or doesn't bring their energy in other parts. It's just something they don't want to do at work. It's the same with activism. It's the same with, all these brands claiming they need to make a stand on all these social issues, but then there's other social issues they completely ignore. And as a result, you alienate parts of your workforce. Like, it's okay to have your business just be focused on the business at hand. It's okay for you as an employee or as a manager to just focus on your work and your people. And that's not a bad thing. Some of the other stuff that's popped up over the past couple months, specifically on TikTok and on Twitter or X, is this whole concept of like, why should I put in more hours than my 9 to 5? That's just my employer exploiting me, and anything you do over and above what you're paid for is for suckers. That's not true. If you're passionate about what you do, if you love what you do, if you want to get ahead in your vocation, if you want to pick up new skills, sometimes that requires raising your hand for stuff that isn't your job, and it requires going above and beyond. There's no substitute for that. So if you don't want to do that, that's fine. If you expect to get paid for every hour that you do, you can contract. You can do hourly work. But what you can't do is look at a group of people that are willing to put in 50 hours a week against 40 hours of pay for periods of time and deem them as being suckers or somehow slaves to the system, because that's not necessarily the case. Now, when your employer starts to take advantage of it, that's when you start having some tough conversations and tough internal dialogues with yourself. So, I think one of the things that's typically thrown at like millennials and Gen Zs is they're mercurial and they job hop a lot. That's emblematic of their generation. I'm a Gen Xer. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, I mean, I think the longest tenure I've had at any one company is over 5 years. I'm coming up to that with the business I just started. And a lot of that had to do with I knew what I wanted to do. I went in, I worked my ass off for my employers and consistently put in above and beyond, and would start having conversations about, hey, I'd love to take the next bump up, or hey, I've been consistently working at this level. I think I need a raise, and voice those concerns to my employer. And if those concerns were ignored, or if I wasn't given the opportunities to move up, sometimes you got to move out to do that. That doesn't mean that a person doesn't want to work or doesn't want to stay focused on one gig. Like sometimes you taking care of yourself and getting what you need out of work requires stuff like that. And like, inflexibility is another thing that pops up, right? Like I think boomers and Gen Xers were painted with this kind of, we've got our way of doing things and we don't want to work around it. That's not true either, right? By virtue of being in the workforce for 15, 20, 25 years, you learn some things, you see some things, you know where the landmines are and not to step on them. You'll always find new ones. But a lot of the work that I do with mentoring younger people or people that are just starting out in their career or not as far along as I am, is I tell them, look, your path is your path is your path. The path that I walked isn't the same one that you're going to walk. But what I can do is I can give you the map to where all the landmines are so you don't step on the same stupid mistakes that I made. And sometimes when you're working in a workforce or when you're working in an office where there's multiple different generations and someone older says, hey, maybe we should think about it this way. If you're younger, don't give this knee-jerk reaction to thinking like they're an old fart that just doesn't want to try things differently. Maybe you kind of consider that there's some experience there that they're trying to impart and bring forward and kind of help everyone along. And I could go on and on about this. I'd love to hear about what are some of the multi-generational things that you've heard about in the workplace. What's some of the stuff that you're dealing with? How did you deal with them? Leave them in the comments below, and maybe we'll do some future episodes on those specific aspects of it. But I think the biggest takeaway from today's discussion is resist at all costs and at any level the urge to take people and chunk them into these big monolithic groups and then decide that you know best what that group needs or that everyone in that group thinks a certain way. It could be political ideology, it could be gender, it could be upbringing, it could be ethnicity, it could be any number of things. Push back on it. It creates the deeper divides that's making things so challenging today. And it blocks you off from actually getting to know people and individuals and what makes them tick and what they want and need. And you just might take something away from it yourself. With that, we're going to sign off for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Click like, click subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things to help us keep growing. I appreciate you so much. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye.